I started my first business in a crappy studio apartment with no air conditioning and a mattress on the floor. This was in 2017 in Austin, Texas. I had just quit a decent-paying job at a SaaS company because I couldn't stop thinking about an idea that wouldn't leave me alone. The idea was painfully simple: help small local restaurants create digital loyalty programs without needing an app. I figured, who the hell wants to download another app just for a sandwich punch card? I noticed every independent cafe had either paper loyalty cards or nothing at all. My pitch was to build a digital punch card that ran via SMS and QR codes. I had no business plan, no investors, and only enough in savings to scrape by for 5 months. My girlfriend at the time thought I was making a huge mistake. We broke up 2 weeks after I left my job. For the first few months, I did everything myself. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., walk into random restaurants during their downtime, and pitch the concept. Most owners didn't understand what I was offering. Some thought I was selling a scam. Others just shrugged and told me they had other priorities. But a small handful, saw potential. My first client was a taco shop near UT Austin. They paid me $30 a month, and I nearly cried after getting the first Venmo payment. I used that win to get more. I designed a terrible-looking flyer and started cold emailing local spots. I was bringing in around $300 by the end of month 3. Not even enough to cover rent, but enough to keep me from quitting. Here's where it gets rough. Around month 5, I ran out of savings. I started driving for Uber at night to cover my bills. I'd spend my days in restaurants, my evenings coding the platform, and my nights shuttling drunk college kids around Austin. I slept maybe 4 hours a night. I got used to people vomiting in my back seat. One night someone stole my phone while I was parked waiting for an order. I cried in the parking lot of a CVS at 2 a.m., wondering what the hell I was doing with my life. But I didn't stop. I kept refining the product. I taught myself how to use Twilio for text automation. I rebuilt the dashboard so it wasn't a UX nightmare. I found a buddy from college who was a designer, and he redid the visuals in exchange for burritos and gas money. Year 1 ended with 42 restaurants on board and just over $19,000 in revenue. I filed my taxes from a library computer because mine had crashed 2 days earlier and I couldn't afford a new one. In year 2, things shifted. A cafe owner I'd worked with connected me with a regional franchisee of a smoothie chain. They had 22 locations across the state. I drove 6 hours to pitch them in person. I brought a laminated deck and homemade swag with the fake name of my company, Zap Loyal, that I had made sound more legit than it was. They bought in. $400/month per location, 6-month contract. That deal changed everything. I hired my first contractor, then another. I finally stopped driving Uber. I upgraded from my air mattress to a real bed. For the first time in 2 years, I could breathe. By 2020, we were making over $300K ARR, still bootstrapped. COVID hit, and I thought we were done for. Restaurants closed, traffic vanished. But weirdly, some owners turned to us. Our digital system let them stay connected with customers without in-person visits. I added online ordering links and a message scheduler. Suddenly, loyalty was less about punch cards and more about connection. That year, we doubled. In 2021, a VC firm slid into my inbox. I wasn't planning to raise, but I took the call. They offered $1.2M on a safe. I said no. Then another fund came. They offered $2M. I still said no. I wasn't trying to become the next unicorn. I wanted to stay small and profitable. My dad called me crazy. Maybe he was right. Instead, I hired a real CTO and turned our scrappy tech into something stable. We expanded to other verticals: hair salons, car washes, indie bookstores. I renamed the company Loopback after a term from my networking classes in college. I spent $2,000 on a new logo. Still too much, but I was finally playing the part of a real business owner. Last year, we passed $1.1M in annual recurring revenue. Still bootstrapped. We have 9 full-time employees, all remote, with profit sharing and no office drama. I take Fridays off now. I travel. I read books again. I even went back and bought that taco shop that gave me my first deal. The owner was retiring, and I wanted to keep it open. Sometimes I still get imposter syndrome. I never went to business school. I didn't have a co-founder. I barely knew how to code when I started. I made every mistake imaginable: bad hires, pricing blunders, feature creep, forgetting to back up our database for 6 months. But I kept going. That was the only thing I did right. I didn't stop. Loopback isn't the biggest, flashiest company. We're not in TechCrunch or being chased by Andreessen Horowitz. But we're profitable. We're helping thousands of small businesses retain their customers. And I finally love what I do. Funny thing is, the girlfriend who dumped me in 2017, she emailed last year asking if I was hiring. I told her we didn't have any openings and wished her the best. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I never planned to be an entrepreneur. I was 33, burnt out, and in a job that paid well but made me feel like I was eroding. My startup story didn't begin with a genius idea scribbled on a napkin or a eureka moment in the shower. It started with an argument. My wife, Leah, and I were fighting because I forgot to pick up our daughter from daycare. Again, I'd gotten caught in a 3-hour meeting that could have been an email. As she vented, something broke loose in my brain, not in anger, but in realization. I was chasing someone else's dream, working for someone who only saw me as a cog in their machine. That night, after we made up, I told her I wanted out. I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I knew it wasn't this. For context, I had a decent job in enterprise software sales, working for a mid-sized SaaS company. The money was good, the hours were hell, and the company culture was what you'd expect from people who wear fleece vests unironically. I'd been there for 8 years, climbing the ladder. I was middle management with a team of 12 and a LinkedIn profile that screamed, "Hire me, I'm safe and boring." I gave myself 6 months to come up with something. I dipped into savings, took freelance gigs writing B2B content, and started thinking about the stuff that actually made me curious. What kept bubbling up was a very specific pain point I'd noticed in my sales career, the disaster that is lead qualification. Everyone uses the same crappy playbooks. SDRs are under pressure to book meetings, so they pass on junk leads. AEs get frustrated. Marketing gets blamed. Rinse and repeat. I thought, what if you could vet inbound leads faster and more intelligently without replacing people? Something that sits between your CRM and your calendar. I didn't have a name yet, but the seed was planted. The first version of the product was awful. It was basically a glorified intake form with a decision tree backend I built in a no-code tool. But I showed it to a few people I trusted, old colleagues, friends in other SaaS companies, and they all had the same reaction. This sucks. But I'd actually use it. That was enough. I found a freelance dev on Indie Hackers who helped me build a better MVP for cheap. We called it FilterFox. Dumb name, but it stuck. The idea was simple. You embed a dynamic intake form on your site, and based on the responses, it auto-qualifies and either books a meeting or asks for more info. If you've ever filled out a type form and immediately gotten a Calendly link, you get the gist. But ours was better because it used real-time firmographic data and a scoring model based on your ideal customer profile. I launched it on Product Hunt in September 2021. We got maybe 200 upvotes. I thought it flopped. But by the end of the week, we had 80 companies signed up for the free tier and 5 paying customers. I didn't sleep that weekend. The next year was chaos. I did sales, support, onboarding, marketing, everything. Leah took a part-time job to help stabilize our income. We fought a lot that year, not because things were bad, but because they were uncertain. Every dollar mattered. Every churned customer felt like a personal failure. But growth came slowly. A podcast I went on gave us our first real bump. Then a LinkedIn post by a well-known GTM consultant brought in 50 leads in a week. We crossed $10K MRR around month 10. I hired our first customer success rep, a guy named Marty who used to sell insurance but had this ridiculous knack for calming angry people. Then I brought on a part-time engineer who just left Twitter during the layoffs. By year 2, we were doing $35K MRR, and we bootstrapped everything. No investors. Just sweat, late nights, and a very forgiving wife. But here's where things got weird. A mid-sized CRM company tried to buy us. Out of nowhere. $2.5 million. It was tempting. Really tempting. We had just hit $50K MRR. My daughter was about to start kindergarten. I was still working from a desk wedged between our laundry room and the water heater. I didn't take the deal. And I don't say that to flex. I say it because it was the hardest decision I've ever made. I remember standing in the kitchen with Leah, trying to do the math on what $2.5M looked like after taxes, after debts, after the celebration. It would have changed our lives. But I knew I wasn't done. FilterFox wasn't done. Instead, I asked that CRM company if they'd like to integrate. They said yes. That partnership brought in 200 new customers over the next 6 months. We passed $1M ARR in October of the next year. We're not a unicorn. We're not even a stallion. But we're profitable. We're small. And we're weirdly beloved by the sales ops community. We've got 9 employees. I still answer support tickets when I can. I still write the onboarding emails. We've got a few competitors now, but our churn is under 2%, and our NPS hovers around 70. Last month, I got an email from one of our first 5 customers. He said, "You've made our sales team 40% more productive without adding any headcount. This tool might have saved my job." I cried when I read it. Not proud tears. Relief tears. Like, holy crap, this actually worked, tears. If you're thinking about jumping into the void and starting something, I'll tell you the 3 things no one told me. 1. Your idea doesn't have to be brilliant. It just has to be painful enough that people pay to make it go away. 2. You will hate your business at some point. That's normal. Don't quit on the bad days. 3. If your partner isn't on board, it won't work. Full stop. Make sure your home life is strong before you throw a grenade into your income. I'm still learning. Still flailing some days. But every time I talk to a customer who says, "We couldn't go back to life before FilterFox," I know I made the right call. My daughter's in 2nd grade now. I never miss a pickup. I accidentally became a $3M. Your founder after lying about a SaaS I hadn't built yet. It all started with a failed freelance pitch. I was doing contract UI/UX work for early-stage startups, mostly out of necessity. I had dropped out of college 2 years earlier after burning out hard, and I didn't have a real plan other than avoiding a 9 to 5. My skills were good, but I hated chasing clients and I was burning out just trying to make rent in Austin. So I decided to try something I'd seen work before, build a productized service. I created a website offering a monthly subscription for unlimited UI/UX design work. Nothing fancy, just a landing page with some pricing tiers and a Stripe integration. I called it Pixel Pilot. The entire thing took about 2 days to set up using Webflow and some templates. Here's the catch. I had no team. It was literally just me. But I used plural language on the site. We, our designers, our team, because, well, that's what every other service site did. I tweeted about it once. Nothing happened for 3 days. Then someone with a decent following retweeted it and boom, 17 customers signed up in 48 hours. At $1, $2.99/month. I went from barely scraping together $3,000/month to $22K MRR. Just like that. I panicked. I had no infrastructure. No intake process, no project management tools, no way to prioritize requests. I stayed up for 72 hours trying to get ahead of it. Trello, Notion, Zapier hacks, even build a Slack workspace to onboard clients. I worked 16-hour days for 2 weeks straight doing all the design work myself. The illusion of a team? Still very much alive. I even created fake team member email addresses to respond to clients from, just to keep the vibe professional. 2 clients dropped in the first month because I took too long to deliver their first drafts. But most stayed. One even complimented the team's turnaround speed. That stung, but also motivated the hell out of me. I hired my first contractor in month 2, a designer in Argentina I found via a dribble cold DM. I was terrified to give up control, but I literally had no choice. By month 3, we had 3 designers and a part-time project manager. I was now making $8K/month personally after expenses, which was already more than I'd made freelancing. Around month 5, I noticed something strange. Clients kept asking for basic front-end dev tasks too. Can you implement this in Webflow? Can you help us tweak our landing page layout? At first I said no. Then I realized, maybe Pixel Pilot could also be a front-end as a service. I spun up a second landing page, rebranded slightly, and made the dev tier $8.99/month. I launched it with a tweet that said, "We're now your startup's design and front-end team." It exploded again. By the end of year 1, we were at $780K ARR. I had no idea what I was doing. Every month I made new mistakes. I hired people too quickly. I hired the wrong people. I took on nightmare clients who sent 50 Slack messages a day. I tried to outsource customer support to the Philippines and it blew up in my face. I underpriced, overpromised, and nearly broke down from stress more than once. But somehow we kept growing. The turning point came at month 14. One of our earliest clients, a startup that raised a $10M Series A, introduced me to their investor. That guy ran a network of SaaS founders and asked if he could get an inside look at our workflow. I told him we had built our own internal tooling for project requests and asset delivery. We hadn't. It was just Notion and Slack chaos. He asked if he could try it out for one of his portfolio companies. I said yes. Then spent 3 weeks building a real MVP of the software I had just invented on the spot. I called it TaskLayer. Basically a Kanban board that integrated directly with Slack, where clients could drag and drop design or dev requests and track progress in real time. Nothing revolutionary, but slick enough to look like a real product. 2 months later, he wanted to invest. I wasn't even fundraising. I ended up raising a $1.5M seed round at a $7M valuation. Insane. At this point, Pixel Pilot had crossed $1.2M ARR, and the software layer was barely launched. We used the funding to go all in on TaskLayer. Hired real engineers. Moved project ops into the platform. Started onboarding new clients directly into it. Word got around. More VCs referred startups to us. We grew faster than I could handle. By year 3, Pixel Pilot plus TaskLayer were doing $3.1M/year combined. We now had 28 team members, half design/dev, half support/product. I had removed myself almost entirely from client work. I was now a full-time CEO, which honestly felt weird as hell. Sometimes I wake up and forget this started with a fake SaaS landing page and a lie about having a team. And yeah, I'm still technically a dropout with no degree and a half-finished resume from 2017. But I also have a real company, payroll, a legal team, and 300-plus clients globally. What I've learned: 1. You don't need to build the product before selling it. In fact, it's better to sell first and validate demand. Just be ready to hustle hard if it works. 2. Speed beats perfection. We outpaced better-funded competitors because we shipped fast and adjusted faster. Our janky MVP outperformed polished apps because it actually solved a painful problem. 3. Don't fake everything, but don't wait for perfect honesty either. I didn't lie to hurt anyone. I lied to survive. Once we had the revenue, we built the thing for real. That's the key. 4. Customers care more about results than structure. Clients didn't care that we were a fake agency early on. They cared that they got designs that helped them raise money or ship faster. 5. Every entrepreneur is making it up as they go. I've met a dozen founders with $10M plus businesses who still have no clue what they're doing week to week. That's normal. Now, I'm trying to figure out how to grow past $10M without losing our soul. We're profitable. Our churn is low. But scaling from here is a new beast. I'm no longer pretending, but I'm still learning on the fly. And to anyone reading this who's stuck in freelancing hell or afraid to launch something half-baked, just do it. Your future might be hiding behind a sketchy landing page and a little audacity. Let me tell you how I accidentally started a 6-figure subscription business selling fancy notebooks, and almost lost it all because I didn't take customer service seriously. This isn't a fairy tale or an overnight success story. It started with a breakup, a drunken doodle, and a $300 printer. I'd been working a corporate job in a mid-tier ad agency in Denver. I wasn't unhappy, but I definitely wasn't fulfilled. I was clocking in, clocking out, and spending my evenings doom scrolling and drinking IPAs. Things weren't bad, but they weren't good either. Then I got dumped. It wasn't even a dramatic breakup, more like a slow realization that we weren't growing together. She moved out. I stayed in the apartment, and suddenly my nights were quiet in a way that hurt. One Saturday night, with nothing better to do, I drank 3 tall boys and started doodling in an old Moleskine. I started writing ridiculous prompts like, describe your ideal pet lizard's personality, and how would your life change if coffee didn't exist? It was weirdly therapeutic. Over the next week, I kept going. More prompts, more drawings. It became a sort of self-dialogue. A few weeks later, a friend came over and flipped through it. This is hilarious. You should make a journal out of this. I laughed. Who the hell would buy this? I would. Cue the entrepreneurial itch. You know the one. That tiny voice that whispers, what if? I didn't know the first thing about printing or selling books. But I knew how to design stuff, thanks to my job. I downloaded InDesign, watched some YouTube tutorials, and mocked up a 50-page journal full of prompts, weird facts, and ridiculous illustrations. It was called the Sideways Journal. I found a print-on-demand site that did soft covers and ordered 10 copies. Total cost? Around $300. I didn't tell anyone except a few close friends. One of them posted about it on Instagram, tagged me, and within a day, I had DMs from people asking how to buy one. That was the push I needed. I slapped together a Shopify site in a weekend, used my ad skills to run a few Facebook ads targeting creative burnout and journaling communities, and crossed my fingers. I sold out of the 10 copies in 4 days. Now, before you think this is where it blows up, it didn't. I ordered 50 more, priced them at $24.99, and they trickled out slowly. But the real turning point came from a random customer who emailed me. "This is amazing. Do you have more?" I said no, but I was working on it. They replied, "You should do a subscription." I'd totally sign up. That was the light bulb. I started thinking, what if I did a quarterly journal? New prompts, new art, different themes. People could subscribe for a year, get 4 editions, and I'd keep things fresh. I pre-sold the first subscription for $80 a year. I thought maybe 5 people would bite. I got 112 signups in the first 2 weeks. That's almost $9,000 in pre-sales. I used that money to partner with a local print shop. The cost per unit dropped drastically when I ordered 250 at a time. I reinvested everything into better design, packaging, and a custom insert for new subscribers with a handwritten note. The next edition sold 200 units. The one after that, 350. Year 1 revenue $48,000. Year 2 $112,000. All of this happened while I was still working my 9 to 5. I barely slept. I was fulfilling orders at midnight, answering emails on lunch breaks, and using PTO to attend small creative fairs on weekends. The hustle was real, but it was fun. But here's where the wheels started to come off. I was so obsessed with growth that I ignored the stuff that wasn't fun, mainly customer service. My inbox was a mess. People asking where their order was, or why their journal had a print defect. I didn't prioritize those emails. I figured most people would understand. Big mistake. One woman, Sarah, sent me 3 emails in 2 weeks. Her order was missing. I ignored them. She posted a screenshot on Instagram, tagging me, calling the business a scam. That post got traction. A few others chimed in with their stories. Some were legit complaints. Others were clearly exaggerations. But it didn't matter. The narrative was forming. I was a flake. That month, my churn rate doubled. I had over 60 cancellations. Several customers requested chargebacks. Stripe flagged my account. I was this close to losing everything. It was the gut punch I needed. I took a weekend and did nothing but answer every single customer email I had neglected. I offered full refunds to anyone who'd waited more than 14 days. I posted a public apology on Instagram, owned up to the mess, and announced that I was hiring a part-time customer support rep, even if it meant less profit. People respected the transparency. Some even resubscribed. It wasn't instant, but over the next 6 months, things stabilized. I built a better email system, created an FAQ page, and offered automatic tracking links. Most importantly, I stopped trying to do it all myself. By the start of year 3, I had 1,200 active subscribers. I left my ad job. My revenue hit $210K that year, and I paid myself for the first time $60K. Not life-changing money, but the most satisfying paycheck I've ever cashed. Now it's year 4. I have a small team, 2 part-time writers, a designer, and the same customer service rep I hired during the crisis. Her name's Tasha, and she's a rock star. We've expanded to include a digital version of the journal for international subscribers, and we're piloting a kids edition next quarter. Looking back, I still can't believe it all started with a heartbreak and a sketchpad. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this. People will forgive a lot if you're honest, and you give a damn. But ignore them, and they'll make sure you regret it. Entrepreneurship is 10% idea, 90% follow-through, and 100% responsibility. 3 years ago, I was a broke 27-year-old living in my friend's basement in Mississauga, Ontario. I had dropped out of college twice, gone through 2 startups that fizzled before launch, and was convinced I was one of those idea guys who just couldn't execute. But everything changed when I stumbled onto an industry I had never even considered: used office furniture. Yeah, that's the business that changed my life. It started during the pandemic. A lot of offices were closing or downsizing, and they were either selling or throwing out expensive desks, chairs, and conference tables. My friend Sam, who I was living with, worked at a moving company and told me they were helping companies offload $3,000 Herman Miller chairs for $100 just to clear space. He joked that we should just start flipping them. That night, I opened Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. It was a goldmine. I found a guy selling 8 high-end ergonomic chairs for $75 each. I knew from a quick Google search that they retailed for $200 plus each. I took a risk and asked my brother for a $1,000 loan. I drove a borrowed van 2 hours out of town and bought the chairs, cleaned them up with some Lysol, and posted them individually at $450 each on Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji. They all sold in 4 days. That was the first moment I thought, maybe I'm not just an idea guy. I paid my brother back immediately and reinvested the rest. Over the next 3 months, I did everything myself: sourcing, cleaning, photographing, posting, messaging, delivering. I learned how to write better at copy. I even experimented with minor repairs and reupholstering. It felt like I was flipping cars, but with way lower risk and fewer regulations. By month 6, I was making around $6,000/month in profit. I moved out of the basement and into a tiny 1-bedroom with a garage I turned into a mini warehouse. The real breakthrough came when I made a connection at a commercial real estate firm. They specialized in finding subtenants for large office spaces and often needed people to decommission entire floors, clearing furniture before the new tenant moved in. The firm was paying junk haulers to dispose of furniture I could sell for thousands. I offered to do it for free if I could keep the inventory. They said yes. I walked into my first big job and almost cried. One company left behind 90 desks, 40 rolling chairs, multiple couches, and even espresso machines and fridges. It took 3 moving trucks and 6 friends, but we cleared it all in 2 days. I flipped the entire lot over the next month for a profit of about $24,000. Now I had enough to rent a 1,800 square foot warehouse in Brampton. That changed everything. I hired one full-time guy to help with pickups and assembly. I built out a rudimentary inventory system in Airtable. I even got a basic Shopify store up and running for people to browse online. Around this time, a random TikTok I posted went viral. It was a 25-second clip showing the before and after of an ugly office chair turning into a clean, high-end item. It got 800,000 views. Suddenly, I had DMs from across Canada asking if I shipped. I didn't, but I figured it out in a week. In year 2, we did $385,000 in revenue with 48% margins. I was finally paying myself more than I ever had in any job. I hired 2 more part-timers and leased a second van. We even started offering full office setups for small businesses and remote workers: desk, chair, monitor arm, cabinet, all delivered and assembled. Here's where the real test came in. In early year 3, supply started drying up. More companies were back in the office, and the volume of free or cheap furniture wasn't the same. I realized we couldn't just rely on scraping Craigslist and waiting for a call. We needed to be proactive. I started cold emailing property managers, office liquidators, and brokers. I created a professional-looking pitch deck and invested in some LinkedIn ads targeting facilities managers. We even offered a revenue share model where companies could get a percentage of the resale value instead of just giving it away. This pivot worked. Our supply chain stabilized, and we were even offered exclusivity on certain liquidation projects. One national firm lets us know in advance of any upcoming closures, and we have a 48-hour head start on acquiring inventory. Now we're in year 3.5. We just passed $1.2 million in lifetime revenue. I have 5 full-time employees, a legit logistics partner for nationwide shipping, and we've expanded into refurbished tech, monitors, docking stations, and even laptops, all geared towards small businesses and solopreneurs who want an affordable, premium workspace. I still don't feel like a real CEO. Most of my days are still spent figuring out shipping quotes, dealing with cranky buyers, or troubleshooting our inventory management system. But I've found a strange kind of pride in the niche we carved out. We're keeping tons of quality furniture out of landfills, giving startups and freelancers access to premium setups for less, and making a real dent in a weird, overlooked market. Here are a few things I learned the hard way. Asterisk, the best business opportunities are often boring. If it sounds too sexy, you're probably too late. Asterisk, cash flow is king. Always have a backup plan if inventory doesn't move as fast as you expect. Asterisk, people love convenience. Our best product is not the chair, it's the fact that we deliver it, set it up, and leave without a mess. Asterisk, documentation and repeatable processes saved me from burnout. I didn't realize how much time I was wasting doing things my way until I started training someone else. Asterisk, the internet is a wild force multiplier. That viral TikTok brought in more leads than 6 months of cold outreach. Next step? I'm eyeing the U.S. market. We're testing fulfillment out of Buffalo this summer with a partner warehouse. If it works, we might set up a U.S. entity. To the basement dwellers reading this, don't sleep on unglamorous industries. There's a fortune in forgotten furniture if you're willing to sweat a little. I didn't mean to become an entrepreneur. Not in the way people talk about it now, with pitch decks, accelerators, and 5-year exit plans. I just hated my job, hated my boss, and hated the way I felt waking up every day. It was mid-2019, and I was working in client services at a small branding agency in Chicago. Decent pay, terrible hours. My boss, Darren, had a thing for 8 p.m. emails and Sunday morning Slack messages. I didn't feel like I was building anything. I was just reacting. One night, after a particularly brutal 12-hour day full of scope creep and a client who thought branding meant changing the font every 2 hours, I walked into my apartment and saw the cutting board I'd made 3 years earlier in a woodworking class collecting dust. Literally, I wiped it off, stared at the grain, and remembered how much I loved making something real. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to make something again. So that weekend, I bought a few slabs of walnut and maple and started making cutting boards in my tiny apartment kitchen. No workshop, no garage, just a couple of clamps, a borrowed orbital sander, and a $90 jigsaw off Craigslist. I posted a few pictures on Instagram with the hashtag handcrafted and went back to work on Monday. That week, I got 3 DMs. Friends wanted to buy them. I charged $40 each, just enough to cover the wood and my time. I made 6 boards that month. Then COVID hit. March 2020. Like everyone else, my world flipped upside down. The agency went remote, and then in May, Darren let half the team go, including me. I got the "we'll keep you in mind if things pick back up" speech. I didn't even finish the call. I just closed my laptop and sat in silence. For 2 days I spiraled. No income. No backup plan. But on the 3rd day, I got an email from someone who'd seen one of my cutting boards on a friend's feed. They wanted one. A big one. I charged $90 and used the last of my severance to buy a better saw. That was the real beginning. I registered a sole proprietorship, built a basic Shopify site, badly, and named the business Grain and Grit. I didn't know the first thing about digital marketing, but I had time and YouTube. I took photos with my iPhone and leaned into the real handmade vibe. No filters. No fancy logo. Just wood, glue, and grit. In the first 3 months, I sold 47 cutting boards. Then I noticed something strange. People weren't just buying for themselves, they were gifting. Birthdays, weddings, housewarmings. A woman emailed to ask if I could engrave a last name into the board. I said yes, then Googled how to do that. I found a guy on Etsy selling CNC engraving attachments for $300. I bought it with a credit card I wasn't sure I could pay off. It was the best decision I ever made. By fall, personalized boards made up 70% of my orders. I added options for wedding dates, quotes, even little icons like hearts or anchors. The boards got fancier. I offered charcuterie boards, serving trays, and coasters. I was working 10 to 12 hours a day, but it didn't feel like work. I crossed $5,000 in monthly revenue in November 2020. My margins were good, wood was affordable in bulk, and I was still working out of my apartment kitchen. But then came the holidays. I underestimated Christmas. Orders exploded in early December. I had 213 orders in 17 days. I didn't sleep. I missed shipping dates. A few boards arrived broken. One lady demanded a refund because the engraving font wasn't romantic enough. I panicked. But I also learned. January 2021. I reinvested everything into the business. I rented a shared workshop space 30 minutes away. I bought a real table saw, a dust collection system, and better clamps. I hired a freelance designer on Upwork to redo the site. I added a note at checkout. Need it by a specific date? Let us know. We'll make it happen. I kept listening to customers. That was my entire business model. Respond to what people actually wanted, not what I thought they wanted. In summer 2021, I released a Build Your Own board page. Customers picked the wood combo, shape, size, and engraving. Sales jumped 40% in a month. By the end of the year, Grain and Grit had done just over $92,000 in gross revenue. I was still solo, still gluing and sanding every board myself. I took a breath. Then I hit a wall. Early 2022, I got tendinitis in my right wrist. My hands were swollen and sore every morning. I'd ignored it too long. The doctor told me to stop woodworking for at least 6 weeks. It felt like a death sentence. Grain and Grit was me. There was no team, no backup. But that injury forced me to do what I'd avoided: delegate. I posted on a local makerspace forum looking for part-time help. I found Tom, a 50-year-old ex-cabinet maker with a calm demeanor and hands like baseball mitts. He could do in 2 hours what took me 5. I paid him $25 an hour, and he was happy. I started training Tom on every step of production. I also hired my cousin to help pack and ship orders. Suddenly, I wasn't drowning. By fall 2022, we had a rhythm. I handled customer service, product design, and marketing. Tom built. My cousin shipped. We streamlined everything. We switched from USPS to UPS for fragile items. We introduced premium packaging with thank you notes. Returns dropped. Reviews spiked. I hit $200K in revenue that year. I started seeing Grain and Grit not just as a product business, but as a gift experience. The majority of our customers never touched the board. They gave it to someone else. So I doubled down. We offer gift boxes, seasonal bundles, and partnerships with local makers for add-ons like honey jars and cheese knives. In 2023, we hit $400K. Still bootstrapped. Still profitable. Still no outside funding. I'm not rich. I drive a 2009 Corolla and still live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. But every day, I get to work on something real. Something mine. I don't answer to Darren anymore. I answer to customers. And to myself. Now in 2025, we have 5 people on payroll. We ship over 1,000 boards a month. We're experimenting with home decor items, floating shelves, live-edge coffee tables. I even spoke at a local high school's career day last month. They asked me what made me take the leap. I told them the truth. It wasn't a leap. It was a series of tiny stumbles forward, one cutting board at a time. I was always the type of person who believed that success was about grinding hard, following the rules, and keeping my head down. I had this traditional idea of what it meant to make it. Get a job, work your way up the ladder, and one day you'd be the boss. Simple, right? But my journey to entrepreneurship wasn't anything like that, and looking back, it's hard to even recognize the person I was before I started. It all began back in 2015, when I was living in a small apartment, working in a mundane corporate job that left me feeling empty. I had a stable paycheck, but no real passion for what I did. I often found myself daydreaming about owning my own business, but I didn't think it was something that could ever happen. I had no business background, no rich relatives to bankroll my ideas, and no connections in the entrepreneurial world. The only thing I had was an idea that had been rattling around in my head for months. One night, I was scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled across a post about a guy who built a business from nothing. He started selling a simple product on eBay and eventually grew it into a full-fledged e-commerce brand. The post wasn't anything extraordinary, but something about it clicked with me. This guy was just like me, no special skills, no insider knowledge. He just found a product, learned how to market it, and stuck with it. I thought, if he can do it, why can't I? The next day, I started researching. I didn't even know where to begin, but I knew I wanted to sell something. I spent hours reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and getting lost in e-commerce forums. I realized that the first step was finding a product to sell. And not just any product, but one that I could build a brand around. Something that would stand out in the crowded online marketplace. I didn't have much money saved up. In fact, I was barely getting by with my 9-to-5 salary, but I didn't let that stop me. I knew I had to start small. So, I came across a product idea that seemed simple: reusable water bottles. They were everywhere, but most of them were either basic plastic bottles or high-end stainless steel bottles that were ridiculously overpriced. I figured there had to be a middle ground, a quality product that was affordable and stylish. I decided I would try to design my own line of eco-friendly, sleek, and durable water bottles. With no design experience and limited funds, I felt overwhelmed, but I pushed forward. I found a supplier overseas who could manufacture the bottles at a decent price. The only problem was, I had no idea how to brand or market them. I was just a guy with an idea and no clue how to make it a reality. At first, I tried to cut corners. I designed the logo myself. It was terrible, created a simple website using a free platform, and launched on social media without any real strategy. I think I sold a handful of bottles in the first few weeks, but it was nothing to get excited about. I had no website traffic, no audience, and honestly, I was feeling defeated. There were days when I considered giving up, especially when I saw other entrepreneurs seemingly making it overnight. But here's where things started to turn around. I decided to reach out to some influencers on Instagram. I had no money for paid ads, so I thought I could leverage their audience. I sent out a dozen messages, most of them went unanswered, but one person responded. She had a decent following, and she agreed to feature my bottle in exchange for a free product. It wasn't much, but I was desperate to get noticed. I shipped her the bottle, and within a week, she posted about it on her account. That single post changed everything. I went from barely making any sales to having a steady stream of orders. People started following me on Instagram, sharing my product, and leaving reviews. I felt like I had cracked the code. I kept reaching out to more influencers, collaborating with micro-influencers who had smaller but highly engaged audiences. Slowly, my brand started to grow. But there were still plenty of bumps along the way. One of the hardest lessons I learned early on was that running a business wasn't just about selling products. It was about managing everything that comes with it. Shipping issues, customer complaints, dealing with returns, handling taxes, it was all a lot to juggle while I still had a full-time job. My 9-to-5 became my safety net, but it also became my biggest obstacle. I found myself staying up late, working weekends, and sacrificing time with friends and family to keep the business afloat. In 2017, after 2 years of side hustling, I decided to take the plunge and go full-time with my business. I had saved enough money to cover my expenses for a few months, but I still felt terrified. It wasn't just about leaving the security of a steady paycheck. It was about taking full responsibility for my business. There was no turning back. I had to make it work. Going full-time forced me to step up in ways I hadn't imagined. I had to refine my marketing strategy, manage customer service, and hire my first employees. I spent countless hours working on improving the website, optimizing my product listings, and refining my brand. The sales grew, but so did the challenges. I had to constantly adapt and find new ways to stand out in a crowded market. By 2019, my business had grown to the point where I was able to hire a team and invest in better technology. I started experimenting with new product lines, expanding into different categories like gym bags and sustainable travel accessories. I was finally in a place where I could step back a bit and work on growing the business rather than just keeping it afloat. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to focus on building a community around my brand. Instead of just selling a product, I started talking about the values behind my brand, sustainability, mindfulness, and empowering people to make better choices for the planet. It resonated with customers, and my brand began to stand for something bigger than just a water bottle. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I now run a full-fledged e-commerce company with a team of 20 people, and we've expanded into international markets. We've made millions in revenue, and while I've experienced many of the highs and lows that come with entrepreneurship, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm still learning, still growing, and still figuring out how to scale even further. The best part is that I now get to do what I love every day. I'm not just selling products anymore. I'm helping people make choices that align with their values, and that feels more meaningful than anything I could have imagined when I was working that corporate job. If you're reading this and you're stuck in a job you hate, feeling like success is something reserved for other people, I want to tell you this. You can do it. It won't be easy, and you'll have to learn a lot along the way, but there's no perfect time to start. The only thing you need is the willingness to try and the persistence to keep going even when it feels like nothing is working. Your first step is just to believe it's possible. The rest will follow. I've always believed that entrepreneurship is a mixture of blind faith, intuition, and sheer perseverance. Looking back on my journey, it feels more like a series of fortunate accidents than some grand master plan. But it worked. I started with nothing more than a laptop, an idea, and an unrelenting desire to not fail. This is the story of how I turned my side hustle into a full-blown business. It all began in 2015 when I was working a corporate job that I hated. The 9-to-5 grind was soul-sucking, and I was constantly checking the clock, waiting for the day to end. I knew I wasn't meant to be there, but I didn't have a clear path to leave. I wanted to do something on my own, but had no idea where to start. That was when I stumbled upon a forum talking about e-commerce and dropshipping. I had heard the buzzwords before, but didn't fully understand how it worked. Something clicked. I started researching like crazy, reading everything I could find online, watching YouTube videos, and subscribing to newsletters. I learned about Shopify, dropshipping, and how you could sell products without having to hold any inventory. It seemed like a dream. All I needed was a laptop and a good Wi-Fi connection. But I was also scared. The more I learned, the more I realized how competitive the e-commerce space was. It was intimidating, to say the least. There were thousands of other people doing the same thing. I was scared I'd fail before I even began. But I had nothing to lose. I was stuck in a job I hated, and the idea of building something from scratch seemed far more exciting than spending another day in my cubicle. I decided to dive in head first. I spent my first few weeks creating a store, picking out a niche, and finding suppliers. I remember sitting at my desk late into the night, customizing my Shopify store, choosing products, and trying to make everything look perfect. But no matter how much time I spent on it, I felt like I was missing something. It wasn't until a mentor of mine, someone I had met on one of those online forums, told me, "Stop worrying about perfection. You can always adjust things as you go. Just start." That advice changed everything. I hit the launch button, and my store went live. At first, nothing happened. No sales. No traffic. I kept tweaking the site, changing the product descriptions, and running ads on Facebook. But still, no traction. I remember thinking, is this it? Have I just wasted a few $100? It was tough, but I refused to quit. I kept pushing forward, running ads, tweaking the website, trying new marketing strategies. Then, finally, one day, I saw my first sale. It was a feeling I can't describe. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had proven to myself that it was possible. And from there, things started to snowball. The sales came in slowly at first, but they started to increase as I refined my marketing strategy. I started experimenting with Instagram influencers, running Google ads, and even trying some email marketing. It was a trial and error process, but I began to learn more about the business every single day. The first few months were rough. I had to balance my full-time job with running the e-commerce store. I remember working late into the night after coming home from work. I barely saw my friends or family, but it didn't feel like work. Every sale was a rush, every click on an ad was validation. Slowly but surely, the business began to gain momentum. But with success came new challenges. As sales picked up, I had to scale. My dropshipping model was working, but I realized I wasn't controlling the quality of the products or the speed of delivery. Some customers were complaining about delays or receiving products that weren't up to par. I couldn't afford to lose my reputation, so I knew I had to pivot. I decided to switch to a different business model, private labeling. This would allow me to source products directly from manufacturers and put my own brand on them. The idea of controlling my own product line felt like the natural next step, but it also meant bigger risks and more money up front. I spent months researching manufacturers, testing products, and negotiating prices. It was an exhausting process, and at times, I felt overwhelmed. But I was committed. The first batch of my private label products arrived, and I nervously opened the boxes. To my relief, everything was perfect. The products were high quality, and the packaging looked professional. I added them to my store and began marketing them with everything I had. Sales started to pick up again, but it wasn't smooth sailing. I had to deal with supply chain issues, returns, and customer service nightmares. I felt like I was constantly putting out fires. There were nights I barely slept, questioning if it was worth it. But something kept me going. I had a vision of what I wanted to create, and I wasn't about to give up on it. In 2018, after 3 years of grinding, I finally reached a point where my e-commerce business was profitable enough for me to quit my corporate job. It was both thrilling and terrifying. I was finally my own boss, but I was also taking on way more responsibility. The weight of running a full business was heavy, but I loved the freedom and control it gave me. I expanded my product line, started hiring people to help with customer service, and invested in professional marketing. As the business grew, I made some big changes. I built a team that shared my vision, improved my website, and even ventured into international markets. Looking back, those early struggles and mistakes were the best learning experiences. Now, in 2025, I run a successful e-commerce brand that generates six figures annually. I've been able to hire a team of talented people who are passionate about the company. I've traveled the world, spoken at conferences, and built a life I'm incredibly proud of. I still remember the feeling of that first sale, and I often think about how far I've come. The most important lesson I've learned through this entire journey is this: entrepreneurship isn't about having a perfect plan or making the right decisions every time. It's about perseverance, learning from mistakes, and being willing to adapt. You'll hit roadblocks and you'll face doubts. But if you keep going, you'll get closer to your goals, even if it takes longer than you expect. And to anyone out there thinking of starting their own business, don't wait for the perfect moment. Just start. The rest will follow. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. So here's my story, and I'm still trying to figure out if I made the right choice or not. It all started about 3 years ago, back when I was working in a corporate job that I absolutely hated. I wasn't always unhappy, but I felt stuck for a long time. I had a degree in business and had worked my way up to a decent position, but there was this constant feeling that I could be doing more with my life. It wasn't that my job was terrible, it was just not what I wanted. I had a manager who was a micromanager, I was working long hours, and the work itself felt pointless. But the pay was good, the benefits were solid, and there was a comfort in knowing that my next paycheck would always be there. It was the perfect trap. So, what did I do? I started daydreaming. I'd come home after work, sit on the couch, and fantasize about a life where I was my own boss, where I could do something creative, where I could make my own rules. I would read success stories of people who left their 9 to 5 jobs to start businesses and thought to myself, why not me? But then, the fear set in. I had no real experience with entrepreneurship. I had a solid job, a mortgage, and a family to think about. The idea of quitting my stable job to chase some vague dream was terrifying. So, I did what anyone would do. I started researching. I was particularly drawn to stories of people who'd built online businesses. E-commerce, digital products, affiliate marketing, everything seemed so attainable. I thought, hey, I'm tech-savvy enough. I could build a website and start selling something online, right? I spent weeks diving into YouTube tutorials, reading articles, and signing up for various e-commerce platforms. I was still working full-time, but I started putting together a plan. I didn't have a ton of money saved up, but I was determined to find a way. Eventually, I decided to go for it. I chose to start an online store selling eco-friendly products. Why eco-friendly? Well, I was passionate about the environment, and I noticed that more and more people were becoming aware of their carbon footprint and looking for sustainable alternatives to everyday items. The market was growing, and I thought it was the perfect niche to tap into. I began with a simple Shopify store. I spent countless hours researching suppliers, creating content, and learning how to market my store. The whole process was incredibly overwhelming, but I couldn't stop. I stayed up late, learning about SEO, Facebook ads, and Instagram influencers. I thought I had it all figured out. But, spoiler alert, I didn't. The first few months were rough. I remember launching my site with high hopes, only to see almost no traffic. I thought, why isn't anyone buying? I started tweaking the site, trying to optimize it, but nothing seemed to work. I wasn't seeing the results I had envisioned. At the same time, my full-time job was starting to feel even worse. I was exhausted from the long hours spent working on my store at night, and it was taking a toll on my physical and mental health. My wife started noticing that I was constantly stressed, and she could see the toll it was taking on me. She was supportive, but she also pointed out that we needed the stability of my job for our family. That's when I reached a breaking point. I remember one night, sitting in front of my laptop, feeling defeated. I hadn't made a single sale in weeks, and I was staring at my credit card bill, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But then, something clicked. I realized that I had been treating this business like a side project, not as something I was fully committed to. I hadn't been treating it like a real business. I had been doing everything half-heartedly. I had to make a decision, either go all in or quit and go back to my miserable corporate life. I chose to go all in. I took a step back, reevaluated my approach, and started fresh. I began by narrowing down my niche. Eco-friendly products were a broad market, and I needed to focus on something specific. After more research, I decided to focus on sustainable home goods, items like bamboo toothbrushes, reusable kitchen wraps, and zero-waste cleaning supplies. I rebranded my store, got professional product photos, and revamped my marketing strategy. This time, I wasn't going to rely on just hoping that people would find me. I invested in Facebook and Instagram ads, targeting people who had shown an interest in sustainability. I started writing blogs about how to reduce waste in daily life and posted on social media about eco-friendly tips and products. Slowly but surely, the traffic started coming in. But it wasn't just visitors. I was actually making sales. It wasn't an overnight success. It took months of tweaking, testing, and learning from my mistakes. But as my sales grew, so did my confidence. I started looking at my business as a real job, not just a hobby. I took the leap and quit my corporate job after almost a year of balancing both. I remember that day leaving the office for the last time. There was fear, excitement, and relief all wrapped into one. It's been a year since I left my job, and things have changed drastically. My store is profitable, I've been able to scale, and I even hired a few employees to help with fulfillment. I no longer stress about my paycheck or the office politics. I make my own schedule, and I get to work on something I'm passionate about every day. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I still face challenges. Managing inventory, dealing with customer complaints, and finding new ways to market my products keeps me on my toes. Some days are great, others are tough. There are still moments where I question if I made the right decision, but then I remind myself of how far I've come. Looking back, I realized the biggest mistake I made at the beginning wasn't the lack of knowledge, it was the fear of failing. I let the fear of failure paralyze me for too long. But now, I understand that failure is just part of the process. The key is to learn from it, pivot when needed, and keep pushing forward. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect moment. There's never a perfect moment. Start small, be consistent, and keep learning. You won't regret it. And if it doesn't work out the way you planned, at least you tried, and you have learned valuable lessons along the way. I don't know if I'm successful yet, but I'm proud of how far I've come. I'm living a life that's true to my values, and that's more than I ever expected when I first quit my job. It's a journey, but it's mine. I grew up in a small, rural town. My parents were hardworking folks, my dad being a mechanic and my mom working as a cashier at the local grocery store. We didn't have much in terms of material wealth, but we had enough. My parents always stressed the importance of education and a strong work ethic. As a kid, I never thought too much about money, except for when I wanted something new, like a video game or a new bicycle. But I also knew that we couldn't afford luxuries, and it always sparked this weird blend of frustration and ambition in me. When I graduated high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I had no clear direction. College seemed like the expected path, but my parents didn't have the financial means to send me. I was left with two options: take on student loans or figure something else out. After some careful thought, I opted to skip college and went to work as a mechanic under my dad. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I was able to learn a lot about the trade. My dad had a lot of connections in the area, and before long, I had my own clients, working on cars and small machinery. But something always bugged me. As much as I loved the work and the camaraderie with the people I met, I knew I wasn't going to build much of a future working for other people. I wanted to own something. I wanted my own business. It wasn't a fully formed idea at the time, but I knew I wanted to do something bigger than fixing engines all day. One day, a guy I knew from high school, Jake, came into the shop with a problem on his truck. He and I were never really close, but he had a reputation for being a go-getter. He had left town and started some small tech company that had become pretty successful. We talked about business, and he gave me some unsolicited advice that stuck with me. He said, "If you ever want to make real money, you've got to stop thinking small. Start thinking about scalability. Find a way to multiply yourself." Jake didn't have to say anything more. It was like a light bulb went off. Scalability. Multiply yourself. These two concepts haunted me for months, bouncing around in my head like a pinball. I began researching, reading books, and watching videos about entrepreneurship. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, considering the limited resources in my small town, but the internet was a game changer. It opened up a world of information that felt like a gold mine. I knew I couldn't simply build a successful mechanic shop if I wanted to create long-term wealth. I needed to think differently. And that's when I hit on the idea of starting a mobile mechanic service. The idea was simple. Instead of people coming to me, I would go to them. At first, I thought it was too obvious of an idea to work, but then I realized that it was the perfect way to scale up. People were busy, and getting their cars fixed on their own schedule would be a massive convenience. But starting a business wasn't easy. I had to take a huge leap of faith. I saved up enough to buy a reliable van, tools, and insurance. And with the little money I had left, I put up flyers all over town, advertising my services. I also created a simple website that allowed people to book appointments online. The first few weeks were slow, and honestly, I almost gave up. There were a lot of quiet days, and I was barely covering the cost of gas and tools. But I stuck with it. I focused on providing the best service I could. I showed up on time, did quality work, and made sure to go the extra mile with every client. Slowly, word started to spread, and customers started referring me to their friends and family. One of the biggest turning points for me was when I worked on a luxury car for a well-known local entrepreneur. He owned a few restaurants in town and had a lot of connections. After I fixed his car, he offered to introduce me to some of his contacts. That one introduction led to several high-end clients who were willing to pay a premium for my mobile services. It was the boost I needed. But then the real challenge came. I was running out of time. I could only work on so many cars each day, and I was beginning to feel burnt out. I realized I had to hire help. But hiring someone meant giving up a portion of my profits, and I was already tight on cash. It was a risk, but I knew I couldn't grow without it. I hired my first employee, a young guy named Tim who was eager to learn. He was great with people, and his enthusiasm gave me a much-needed boost. We expanded our services to other towns nearby, and I started building a team of mechanics. I implemented systems to streamline scheduling and ensure that the quality of work remained high. I even created a loyalty program to encourage repeat business. As the business grew, so did my ambitions. I started thinking about how I could scale even further. That's when I stumbled onto the concept of franchising. I had seen other businesses do it successfully, and the idea of duplicating my mobile mechanic service across the region seemed like a dream. I spent the next 2 years studying everything about franchising: how to structure agreements, how to maintain quality control, and how to recruit franchisees. I put together a business plan, and after many rejections, I finally found an investor who believed in my vision. With their backing, I launched the first franchise in a neighboring city. We marketed it heavily online, and before long, the franchise took off. Now, 5 years later, my company is operating in multiple states with over 50 locations. We employ hundreds of people and have expanded beyond just cars to include everything from motorcycles to heavy machinery. We've developed mobile diagnostic tools and apps that make the process even easier for customers. Looking back, I never would have imagined I'd go from fixing cars in a small town to running a multi-state franchise. There were so many moments of doubt, and I felt like giving up more times than I can count. But the drive to create something bigger, to scale, and to make a lasting impact kept me going. If I could offer one piece of advice to anyone starting their own journey, it would be this: think big. Don't get stuck in small thinking. The road won't be easy, but with persistence, you'll find your way. I never thought I would become an entrepreneur. Honestly, I never thought I was entrepreneur material. Growing up, I was always the shy, introverted kid who preferred to read a book or play video games rather than socialize or think about starting a business. But life has a funny way of pushing you into places you least expect, and my journey into entrepreneurship wasn't planned. It was born out of necessity, creativity, and a bit of dumb luck. It all started in my mid-20s. I was working a 9-to-5 job as a project manager for a small tech company. The pay wasn't great, the work wasn't exactly exciting, but it was stable. And for someone who wasn't sure what they wanted out of life, stability was enough. I didn't have any grand ambitions. My life was predictable, and while I wasn't thrilled, I was comfortable. That comfort shattered one morning when I got a call from my manager. The company was downsizing, and I was one of the first to be let go. The news hit me hard, but not because I was particularly passionate about my job. I wasn't, but because I realized I didn't have a backup plan. I had no savings, no side hustle, and no idea what I was going to do next. At first, I freaked out. I applied to a few jobs, but it was 2008, and the economy was on the brink of collapse. I barely got any responses. My friends, most of whom were in similar jobs, were also scrambling to find work. I realized I was stuck in a system that was completely out of my control. So, in a desperate attempt to get by, I started doing freelance project management and tech consulting, offering my services to small businesses that couldn't afford the big consulting firms. It was a slow start. I had to hustle hard to get clients, and for the first few months, I was barely scraping by. But slowly, the work picked up. It wasn't glamorous work. I was just managing websites and doing tech support for local businesses. But there was something liberating about working for myself. I could make my own hours, choose the projects I wanted, and, most importantly, I didn't have to answer to anyone. But the real shift happened when I met Sarah. Sarah was a web designer who had started her own freelance business a few years before. We met through a mutual client, and we hit it off immediately. Over coffee one afternoon, we were talking about the struggles of freelancing, and she shared something that changed my perspective entirely. Why are we just offering services? We're both skilled enough to create something bigger than this. Why not build something we can scale, something that doesn't rely on our time directly? I'll admit, I didn't understand what she meant at first. I was so used to trading my time for money that the concept of building something scalable seemed foreign. But as she talked, the idea started to click. Why should I be limited by the number of hours in a day? Why not build a business that could run without me being glued to my desk? Sarah and I decided to partner up. She would handle the design side of things, and I would manage the operations. We brainstormed and came up with an idea to create a platform that would allow small business owners to build their own websites without needing to hire a designer or developer. At the time, website builders were still pretty clunky and expensive, and there was a growing demand for affordable, DIY website solutions. The next step was to build the platform. We didn't have any capital, so we bootstrapped everything. I spent long nights coding while Sarah worked on the design. We didn't have any formal training. We just learned as we went, watching YouTube tutorials and reading blog posts. The first version of the platform was far from perfect. It was buggy, clunky, and had barely any features. But it worked well enough to give people a taste of what we envisioned. We launched the platform with little fanfare. It was just a simple landing page with a sign-up form. We didn't know how to market it, but we had a few contacts in the small business world, so we sent out some emails to people we knew, offering them free trials in exchange for feedback. To our surprise, people actually signed up. Slowly but surely, users started using our platform. The feedback was invaluable. It gave us insight into what worked, what didn't, and what people wanted from a website builder. We iterated on the platform, fixing bugs, adding features, and improving the user experience. But even though we had users, we were still struggling to make ends meet. For the first year, we barely made any money. The cost of hosting, software licenses, and marketing were eating into our savings. But we were determined. We lived frugally, working from coffee shops, sleeping on Sarah's couch when I couldn't afford rent, and eating ramen for weeks on end. It was grueling, but we were focused. Then came the tipping point. We had one user who was an SEO expert. He loved the platform and recommended it to a few of his clients. Those clients loved it too. Word started to spread, and soon we were getting more sign-ups than we could handle. We started charging a small monthly fee, and with that revenue, we were able to hire a small team to help with development and customer support. By the second year, things started to click. Our platform was gaining traction, and we were getting noticed. Investors started reaching out, but we were hesitant. We didn't want to give up control of the company we had built from the ground up. But we also realized we needed more capital to scale faster. We eventually accepted an investment offer from a small venture capital firm that believed in our vision. The funds allowed us to hire more people, expand our marketing efforts, and build out more features. We also started partnering with other businesses, offering white-label versions of our platform for agencies that wanted to offer website building to their clients. By year 5, we were profitable, with thousands of users and a team of 20. Our platform had grown far beyond what we originally imagined. We had refined our user experience, implemented advanced features, and even created an entire ecosystem around our product. What started as a small, scrappy project had turned into a thriving business. Looking back, it's crazy to think how far we've come. If you had told me back when I lost my job that I would eventually run a successful company, I wouldn't have believed you. It wasn't easy. There were countless nights of doubt, frustration, and failure. But in the end, it was worth it. I learned that entrepreneurship isn't about having all the answers right away. It's about being willing to adapt, hustle, and never give up. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that you don't have to have everything figured out from the start. Sometimes, the best opportunities come when you least expect them. And sometimes, failure is just a step towards something greater. So, to anyone reading this who's thinking about starting their own business, don't wait for the perfect moment. Start small, fail often, and embrace the journey. It might just take you to places you never imagined. I grew up in a small town where the biggest excitement was the annual county fair, and the biggest job opportunity was at the local factory. I never imagined that one day I would become an entrepreneur, let alone run a successful online business. But the path I walked to get here wasn't anything close to easy, and it started with a simple idea in a small, cramped apartment. It was the summer of 2015, and I had just graduated college with a degree in business. I had big dreams, but no real direction. I tried a few internships after graduation, but nothing stuck. I worked odd jobs to make ends meet, waitressing, temp office work, and even delivering pizza. Nothing seemed to align with the future I had envisioned for myself. I spent a lot of time reading about successful entrepreneurs and business stories, trying to find inspiration. Then one night, I had an idea. I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through social media and looking at some DIY posts. One thing led to another, and I came across a post about how people were making money by selling handmade goods online. I had always been crafty and had a bit of an eye for design, but I never thought of it as a business opportunity. The more I read, the more I realized that this could be my ticket out of the 9 to 5 grind. I dove headfirst into research. I spent hours reading about online marketplaces like Etsy, Amazon Handmade, and eBay. I looked at what types of products were trending, what people were buying, and how much money could be made. I was amazed by the number of people who had turned simple hobbies into thriving businesses. And then it hit me. I could do this. I had a small collection of vintage jewelry I'd been collecting over the years, and I could refurbish and sell it. At first, I was overwhelmed. The idea of selling online was exciting, but the execution seemed complicated. How do you price your items? How do you photograph them to make them look appealing? What kind of branding should I use? The questions were endless, and every time I thought I had an answer, I discovered 10 more things I hadn't considered. I started small. I gathered the jewelry I had, cleaned it up, and took pictures with my phone. I didn't have a fancy camera or a proper setup, but I made it work. I posted my first items online and waited. It took weeks before I made my first sale. But when it happened, I couldn't believe it. Someone had bought one of my pieces. I had made $25, and it was one of the happiest moments of my life. I felt like I had just unlocked the door to a new world. That $25 was more than just money, it was validation. With that first sale under my belt, I became obsessed with improving. I invested in a better camera, learned how to take better photos, and started paying attention to things like SEO and social media marketing. I joined Facebook groups and Instagram communities dedicated to handmade goods, learning from others and sharing my work. Slowly but surely, sales started to pick up. But the road to success wasn't smooth. As I grew, I faced setbacks that tested my resolve. The first challenge came when I received a batch of jewelry from a supplier that was completely subpar. The items were tarnished and poorly made, and I had to refund several customers who were unhappy. The financial strain of that mistake almost made me give up. I lost money, time, and a lot of confidence. I remember spending days moping around, wondering if I was cut out for this. But after a week of self-doubt, I made the decision to double down. I would learn from my mistakes and keep moving forward. I researched better suppliers, improved my product quality, and revamped my entire process. I vowed never to compromise on quality again. The second major challenge came when I began to grow my inventory. As my business took off, I realized that I had a limited amount of space in my apartment to store all the products. My living room turned into a makeshift warehouse, and it wasn't sustainable. I couldn't afford a commercial space, so I had to get creative. I started using my parents' garage as storage, but managing inventory between 2 locations was chaotic. That's when I decided to automate as much as possible. I invested in inventory management software and began to streamline my operations. It was a learning curve, but once I figured it out, it made life a lot easier. The next big leap came when I decided to hire my first employee. Up until then, I had done everything myself: design, sourcing, packaging, and customer service. It was exhausting. But with a growing customer base and an increasing number of orders, I couldn't do it all anymore. I was terrified to take on the responsibility of a paycheck, but I knew it was necessary to scale. I hired a part-time assistant who helped with packaging and customer service. This freed up time for me to focus on expanding the product line and improving marketing. I learned how to delegate, which was harder than I thought, but it was the best decision I ever made. As a result, sales soared. I had finally built a team, however small, and it felt like everything was falling into place. Fast forward to 2019, and my business had reached a level I never thought possible. I expanded beyond just selling jewelry. I began offering custom pieces, and I even started collaborating with other makers and artists. What started as a side hustle in my apartment had grown into a full-fledged business. By then, I had moved into a small office space and hired a few more employees to handle the increasing demand. Despite all of this growth, I continued to face challenges. One of the hardest moments came during the pandemic in 2020. The entire world seemed to shut down overnight. Orders slowed to a trickle, and many of my suppliers faced delays. I had to pivot quickly and find new ways to connect with customers. I doubled down on my online presence, using Instagram Live to showcase my products, interact with followers, and create a sense of community. Slowly but surely, sales picked up again, and I even found new customers who had never heard of my brand before. Looking back, I realized that all of these struggles, setbacks, and failures were part of the journey. Every time I felt like giving up, I learned something new and grew stronger. Today, my business generates 6 figures in revenue, and while it's still a lot of work, it's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. I'm proud of what I've built, but I never forget where I came from: the apartment, the sleepless nights, the fear of failure. And for anyone out there wondering if it's possible to go from nothing to something, it is. It takes hard work, patience, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. Don't be afraid to start small, and don't give up when things get tough. Your dreams are achievable, but they won't happen if you don't take that first step. I've been running my own small tech startup for almost 5 years now. My story is one of constant challenges, self-doubt, triumphs, and failures, an endless roller coaster that many entrepreneurs know all too well. But despite everything, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It all started during my final year of college. I was studying computer science and had a dream to build something that could make an impact. I wasn't sure what that something would be, but I knew it would be tech-related. I had worked a few internships during my summers, learned a ton, and was beginning to realize that I wanted to be my own boss one day. The question was, how? I came across a tech startup competition during my last semester and decided to go for it. The prize money was decent, but more importantly, it was an opportunity to start building my first product. So, I teamed up with 2 friends from my classes, one who had an eye for design and another who was great at marketing. We had a rough idea of a product that could improve communication between remote teams. We all had some experience with remote work, and we figured we could make a tool that would help teams collaborate more seamlessly. The first few weeks were full of late nights and endless brainstorming. Our idea was simple, but we were new to the whole startup world. We didn't know how to code it, didn't know how to sell it, and certainly didn't know how to scale it. But we were naive, and that worked in our favor. We just pushed forward, learning along the way. My role was to build the prototype, so I spent every spare hour coding and experimenting with different technologies. Our first version was embarrassingly rough, but we were excited about it. We were doing something. The competition day came, and we nervously pitched our idea to a panel of judges. We didn't win. In fact, we didn't even make it into the top 5. But the feedback we received was valuable. One judge in particular gave us a suggestion that stuck with me. Your product could work, but you need to focus more on solving a specific pain point, not just adding another tool to the pile. That comment resonated with me. It hit me that we were trying to solve too many problems at once. So, after the competition, we scrapped everything and started over. This time, we focused on a specific aspect of remote team communication, real-time feedback. We saw that many teams struggled with getting timely input on their projects, so we narrowed our scope to building a tool that would allow remote teams to give and receive feedback instantly in an organized and efficient way. With this new direction, we started building again, this time with a clearer goal. It was a grind, but we knew we had to make it work. We spent months developing the product, testing it with friends, and iterating based on feedback. As we got closer to finishing the first version, we realized we had no idea how to actually get people to use it. None of us had experience in sales or marketing, so we were essentially flying blind. But we were resourceful, so we started reading articles, listening to podcasts, and reaching out to people who had been through the startup grind before. The first few months after we launched were rough. We had a handful of users, mostly people we knew, who gave us feedback, but we weren't growing as quickly as we had hoped. We tried cold emailing companies, reaching out to influencers, and even offering free trials to get people to bite, but nothing really clicked. Then came the breakthrough. We got a random email from a mid-sized company that wanted to try our tool. It was a small win, but it was enough to give us hope. Over the next few months, we worked closely with that company to refine our product, and word started to spread. Other companies reached out, asking to try our tool, and before we knew it, we had a small but loyal customer base. It wasn't much, but it was a start. However, things started to get difficult again. We were running out of money, and none of us were taking salaries. We had used up all the seed funding we had managed to raise through friends and family. We were at a crossroads. Either we needed to secure more funding, or we'd have to shut the whole thing down. The pressure was mounting. There were nights when I stayed up thinking that all our hard work might just amount to nothing. That's when we decided to go for a seed round. We started pitching investors and went through dozens of rejections. Most of them told us our idea wasn't scalable or that we were too early. It was crushing, but we didn't give up. Then, after months of pitching, we finally found an investor who believed in our vision. The deal wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep us afloat. We signed the paperwork and got to work. With the new funding, we were able to hire more developers, improve the user interface, and launch new features. Our growth exploded. We went from a few dozen customers to hundreds in just a few months. The feedback from our users was overwhelmingly positive, and we were starting to build a brand. I remember the first time we received a genuine, unsolicited testimonial from a customer. It felt like a victory. It was a sign that we were on the right track. As we grew, the challenges didn't disappear. In fact, they multiplied. We had to deal with scaling issues, hire the right people, and figure out how to keep the company culture intact while expanding rapidly. We hit some bumps in the road. There were a few months where our churn rate spiked, and we were struggling to maintain user engagement. But we learned to embrace these challenges as part of the journey. Looking back, the path hasn't been smooth. There have been times when I thought about giving up, times when the stress was too much, and the future seemed uncertain. But every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself why I started in the first place, to build something that mattered. I kept going, and little by little, things started to come together. Fast forward to today, and the company is thriving. We've raised additional funding, expanded our team, and have clients across the globe. We've come a long way from the rough prototype we pitched in that first competition, and while there are still challenges ahead, we've learned to embrace the uncertainty and push forward. If I had one piece of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, it would be this: don't expect everything to be easy. In fact, expect it to be hard, harder than you can imagine. But also expect that if you stick with it, you'll learn and grow in ways you never thought possible. The road to success is rarely a straight line, but the journey itself is worth it. We're not done yet. The dream is still alive, and I'm more excited than ever for what comes next. I started my journey as an entrepreneur almost by accident. It was the summer of 2015, and I was just finishing up my degree in graphic design. I had no intentions of becoming a business owner at the time, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. What began as a side project to help a friend turned into something I never could have imagined. It all started when my friend, Jake, asked me to help him design a logo for his new landscaping business. He didn't have much money to spend, and I was happy to help out for a few bucks. I designed the logo in exchange for a small fee, and that was that. At least, that's what I thought at the time. A week later, Jake called me again, asking if I could create some flyers for his business. His phone was ringing off the hook, and he needed to advertise his services. I agreed, thinking it would be another quick and easy task. After a few more projects, I realized something. I was getting better at this. I was designing more than just logos and flyers. Jake started referring me to his other friends who needed graphic design services for their own businesses. Slowly but surely, I started building a small client base. In between my freelance gigs, I was working part-time at a local coffee shop to make ends meet. But the money I was making from these design projects was enough to make me consider doing this full-time. The turning point came one evening while I was working my shift at the coffee shop. I was behind the counter, making lattes, when I got a phone call from a local tech startup. They had seen my work through one of Jake's referrals and wanted to hire me for a major project. The pay was significantly higher than anything I had ever earned, and the opportunity was too good to pass up. The only problem was that I didn't have enough time in my schedule to juggle both the coffee shop and my freelance work. That night, I stayed up late, weighing my options. I had a choice: keep my steady job at the coffee shop, where I felt comfortable but unfulfilled, or take the plunge and dive headfirst into the unknown world of entrepreneurship. It wasn't an easy decision, but deep down, I knew I had to take the risk if I ever wanted to make something of myself. The next day, I handed in my resignation at the coffee shop. I was officially a full-time entrepreneur, with no backup plan if it didn't work out. The fear was real, but so was the excitement. For the first few months, things were a whirlwind. I was working around the clock, taking on every project I could get my hands on. The startup paid well, but I still had to hustle to make enough money to cover my living expenses. I spent countless hours perfecting my craft, learning new design software, and building a portfolio that would attract more clients. Slowly but surely, I started gaining traction. Word of mouth spread, and my reputation as a reliable, high-quality designer grew. But as the business grew, so did the challenges. The constant pressure to deliver high-quality work on tight deadlines started to take its toll. I wasn't just the designer anymore. I was also the accountant, the marketing team, the customer service representative, and the project manager. My work-life balance was non-existent, and I was burning out fast. That's when I realized I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. I hired my first employee, a fellow graphic designer named Sarah, who I had met at a design conference a few months earlier. Sarah was a great fit for the team. She had a keen eye for detail and a strong work ethic, and most importantly, she shared my passion for delivering excellent work to our clients. As the team grew, I found myself in a new position. I was no longer just designing. I was managing people, delegating tasks, and overseeing projects from start to finish. The transition was challenging, but it forced me to grow as a leader. I started to understand the importance of systems, communication, and delegating tasks effectively. Slowly but surely, my business became more organized and efficient. However, just as things were starting to stabilize, the landscape of the design industry shifted. With the rise of online freelance platforms like Fiverr and Upwork, competition was fierce. Clients could now find cheap, low-quality designs from around the world, and I had to figure out how to stay competitive while maintaining the quality that set me apart. I spent a lot of time thinking about how to differentiate myself. After months of brainstorming, I came up with the idea to offer a premium service that went beyond just design. I would offer a full branding package, including logo design, website design, and marketing materials, with an emphasis on storytelling and creating an emotional connection with customers. I called it the Brand Transformation Package. It was a gamble, but I decided to take it. I revamped my website, created new marketing materials, and redefined my brand. I positioned myself as a high-end designer who could help businesses transform their brands and tell their unique stories. It was a bold move, but it paid off. The first few clients I pitched the new package to were hesitant at first, but after showing them the value of a cohesive brand strategy, they were sold. Word of mouth spread, and I began attracting higher-paying clients who valued quality over price. My business was now on a much stronger foundation, and I was finally able to focus more on what I loved: creative work and helping businesses grow. By 2020, my design agency had expanded to a team of 12 employees, including designers, marketers, and project managers. We had a steady stream of clients, and the financial stability I had once longed for was now a reality. But even as the business grew, I knew that the key to success wasn't just about the work I did, it was about the relationships I built along the way. I made it a priority to stay connected with my clients and always deliver more than what was expected. Looking back, I never could have predicted how my life would change. What started as a simple favor for a friend turned into a full-fledged business. But it wasn't easy. There were plenty of sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I wanted to throw in the towel. But I learned that success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about persevering through it, adapting to change, and never losing sight of the bigger picture. Today, I'm proud of what I've built, but I never forget where I started. I still work with small businesses, and I make it a point to mentor young entrepreneurs who are just starting out. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: entrepreneurship is a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly learning, growing, and evolving, and if you can embrace the challenges along the way, the rewards will follow. I'm living proof that you don't have to have a perfect plan or a huge budget to start a business. You just have to be willing to take the first step, learn from your mistakes, and keep going, no matter how hard it gets. So, I've never really told this story in full, but here goes. This is the tale of how I went from being broke with $75 to my name to running a tech startup that's on track to hit $10 million in revenue this year. It's been a wild ride, with moments that made me question my sanity, but I think it's worth sharing in the hope that someone out there might be inspired to keep going. Let's rewind to about 7 years ago. I was 23, living in a dingy one-bedroom apartment in a city I moved to after college. I had no job prospects and was barely getting by on freelance gigs. My bank account was constantly teetering between negative and a few bucks in the black. I had a degree in business, but honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a few ideas here and there, but nothing that felt like a concrete plan. I just knew I couldn't keep living paycheck to paycheck. I spent most of my days on my laptop, scrolling through Reddit. Yes, I was one of those people. At the time, I stumbled across this sub dedicated to people building businesses from the ground up. Some of these stories were like fairy tales. People who went from having nothing to becoming millionaires in a matter of years. At first, it felt like just another motivational rabbit hole, but I couldn't stop reading. Something clicked. I started thinking about what skills I had. I was good with computers, had a background in marketing, and loved problem solving. I remember one night, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I had an idea. What if I could create a software solution that helped small businesses streamline their social media marketing? Everyone always talked about how important social media was for business growth, but many small business owners had no clue how to harness it effectively. I had no coding experience, but I thought, hey, how hard can it be to learn? I bought a few online courses, learned how to code, thanks to Google and Stack Overflow, and set to work on building a prototype for my app. My days were spent coding, and my nights were spent studying marketing strategies to ensure that I could actually sell the product when it was ready. Fast forward 3 months, and I had a very basic prototype. It didn't do much, but it was enough to show people that I was serious. I took a chance and reached out to local businesses I knew, offering them a free trial of the product in exchange for feedback. Most of them said no. Some never responded. But one small business owner, a local cafe owner, said yes. I spent the next 2 months working closely with them to fine-tune the product. I learned so much from that partnership. I learned about user experience, real customer pain points, and how to improve the app based on feedback. I kept working on it at night and continued to refine the app. At the same time, I was slowly starting to get a few paying customers. In fact, I had a breakthrough when I cold called a small business owner in another city. I told him about the product, and after a brief demo, he signed up. That was my first big customer, and it felt like winning the lottery. But here's where the story gets interesting. Even though I was making some money, I was still living paycheck to paycheck. I had no savings, and the pressure was building. I wasn't sure if I could keep going at the pace I was. I had to make a decision. Do I keep grinding away at this business, or do I go back to getting a regular job and cut my losses? I'll be honest. I was close to giving up. I thought about how easy it would be to just pack it in and find a stable job, but something inside me refused to quit. There was this small voice that said, what if you just keep going a little longer? What if this is the turning point? So, I did what I had to do. I maxed out my credit cards. I took a risky bet on myself and invested everything into marketing. I hired a freelancer to improve the app's user interface, and I hired a marketing consultant to help with social media campaigns. I was putting everything I had into making this work. I don't think anyone could really understand how stressful it was during those months. I was constantly hustling, sending out cold emails, offering free trials, learning everything I could about marketing and business. But eventually, the effort paid off. The app started getting traction. More people started signing up, and my customer base grew. I even started to get some press, which was a huge boost to the business. By the end of year 1, I had made just under $100,000 in revenue. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a solid foundation to build on. I reinvested every penny back into the business. I hired a small team, and we started working on expanding the app's features. As the years went by, we added new features, improved the user experience, and built a loyal customer base. We focused on delivering value to our users, and word of mouth started to spread. We launched an updated version of the app that was much more polished, and by the end of year 2, we crossed the $1 million revenue mark. That was when I realized we had something real. In year 3, I decided to scale aggressively. I took out a loan, another risky move, to fund expansion and hired more people. We brought in a sales team, customer service reps, and more developers to keep up with demand. That was the turning point. We went from being a small, scrappy startup to a legitimate company with dozens of employees. Revenue grew exponentially. By year 4, we were a multi-million-dollar company. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. It feels surreal to see the numbers, to have a product that helps thousands of businesses. The early days were filled with so much uncertainty, but I'm grateful for every tough decision and every risk I took. Now, we're on the verge of raising a series of funding round, and the future is looking incredibly bright. I guess the moral of the story is this: entrepreneurship is a hell of a ride. It's not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. But if you have an idea and the drive to make it work, you can do it. There were so many moments where I thought about quitting, but I'm glad I didn't. So, if you're out there struggling with your own business idea or wondering if it's worth it, just keep going. You might be closer to success than you think. And yeah, now I can afford a nice dinner once in a while. I still can't get over how far I've come. I'll never forget the days when I had just $75 to my name. And that's how I went from broke to building a successful startup. # never give up #startups #entrepreneur life. I started my entrepreneurial journey when I was 26. At the time, I was working a 9-to-5 job that paid the bills but left me feeling empty and unfulfilled. I spent most of my free time thinking about starting my own business. But like most people, I had a lot of fears. I had no money saved up, no real business experience, and frankly, I had no idea where to even begin. What I did have, though, was a hunger for something more. I've always been passionate about fitness. Since high school, I loved working out, and I felt that a healthy body was the foundation of a healthy mind. But as much as I loved the fitness world, it always felt like there were so many barriers to entry for people who were just getting started. Gym memberships were expensive, and personal training sessions seemed out of reach for the average person. I thought to myself, what if there was a way to make fitness accessible and affordable for everyone? The idea for my business was born from this question. I didn't have a clear plan, but I had a concept. I wanted to create an online platform that would provide affordable, high-quality workout plans and nutrition advice, with the option of virtual personal training for a fraction of the cost. It wasn't a new idea, but it was one that I felt was underdeveloped. I noticed that most fitness apps and services were either too expensive or didn't offer personalized guidance. I wanted to bridge that gap. The first major obstacle I faced was the lack of capital. I didn't have a huge savings account, and I certainly wasn't in a position to take out a business loan. So, I decided to bootstrap everything. I spent months working on a plan and learning everything I could about the industry. I spent my evenings after work reading about web development, social media marketing, and customer acquisition. I even learned how to build a website on my own using WordPress, though I had no background in coding. During the first few months, I worked tirelessly to create a prototype of the platform. I spent long nights recording workout videos and writing articles about health and fitness. I designed the website myself, though it was far from perfect. But I didn't care. I just needed to get something out there. I didn't want to wait for the perfect moment. I knew that perfection was a moving target, and the best thing I could do was start. Once I had something that resembled a product, I began marketing it. I had no budget for advertising, so I turned to social media. I started posting on Instagram and Facebook, sharing workout tips, diet advice, and motivational content. I also connected with influencers in the fitness industry, offering them free access to my platform in exchange for reviews and shoutouts. To my surprise, a few of them took the bait and helped me spread the word. The first few sales came in slowly. I remember the first time someone paid for a subscription to my platform. It was a thrilling feeling, knowing that someone was willing to pay for something I had created. But the journey was far from easy. My website had bugs, my content wasn't as polished as I wanted it to be, and the competition was fierce. I remember feeling like I was in over my head most of the time. I'd read about success stories from other entrepreneurs, but I had no idea if I was on the right path. As I continued to grow, I realized that customer service was going to be the key to success. I personally responded to every email, every complaint, and every suggestion. I made sure to engage with my audience on social media, responding to comments and messages as quickly as possible. It paid off. Over time, people began to appreciate the personal touch, and word-of-mouth referrals started pouring in. But just when things were starting to look up, I hit a major roadblock. I realized that the platform wasn't scalable in its current form. I was the only one working on it, and I couldn't handle all the content creation, customer service, and technical work on my own. I needed help, but that meant more money, which I didn't have. I was stuck in a catch, 22. To grow, I needed more resources, but I didn't have the funds to invest in the business. That's when I took a leap of faith. I decided to invest in hiring a small team. I started with a freelance developer to improve the website and a content writer to help with blog posts and guides. I also started working with a designer to rebrand the platform and make it look more professional. I was terrified. I had no idea if this investment would pay off, but I knew that without a team, I couldn't take the business to the next level. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. With the help of my team, the platform started to evolve. We launched new features, improved the user experience, and created more personalized workout plans. The growth was slow but steady. We started getting more customers, and more importantly, our existing customers were sticking around. The community we had built was loyal, and it was clear that we were doing something right. But the journey didn't stop there. As the business grew, I faced new challenges. I had to learn about scaling, managing cash flow, handling customer complaints, and dealing with all the unexpected issues that came with running a business. There were months where we barely broke even, and there were times when I thought about throwing in the towel. But every time I felt discouraged, I would remind myself why I started in the first place: to make fitness accessible to everyone. 5 years later, my business is unrecognizable compared to when I first started. What began as a small, one-man operation has now grown into a full-fledged company with a team of 15 employees. We have thousands of active subscribers, and the platform continues to evolve. But the most rewarding part of the journey has been hearing from customers whose lives have changed because of our services. Some have lost weight, others have gained strength, and many have transformed their overall health and well-being. I get emails every day from people who tell me that they never would have been able to afford personal training or a gym membership, but they were able to make lasting changes through our platform. There were plenty of tough moments along the way, and the journey wasn't easy. There were times when I thought about quitting, and there were moments when I questioned whether I was cut out for entrepreneurship. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. The challenges made the successes that much sweeter. And now, I'm in a place where I can confidently say that I built something meaningful from scratch. It took time, sacrifice, and perseverance, but it was worth every single moment. To anyone thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect time. There will never be a perfect moment to start. You'll never feel completely ready, and you'll never have everything figured out. But if you have a passion for something, if you're willing to put in the work, and if you're willing to take risks, then take that first step. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. You might not have all the answers, but you'll figure it out as you go. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.